Manchester United's midfield is changing, and while the transfer window has produced plenty of headlines, one question matters more than the rest. How does Carlos Baleba actually fit into Michael Carrick's Manchester United? Because this isn't simply about adding another talented midfielder. It's about balance. It's about mobility. It's about giving United something their midfield has been missing. And potentially, it's about finding the final piece of Carrick's new midfield. To understand why Baleba matters, we first have to look at the scale of Manchester United's midfield rebuild. Carrick is entering a season with major expectations. Manchester United want to compete at the highest level again, and that means building a midfield capable of surviving the intensity of the Premier League while also competing in Europe. United couldn't simply depend on one combination every week. They needed quality, they needed different profiles, and they needed depth. That is why the midfield became such an important part of the summer rebuild. Rather than concentrating an enormous amount of money on one superstar midfielder, United's strategy has been about building a deeper and more flexible group. The result is competition for places and, more importantly, different options for different matches. But there was still something missing, a genuine defensive anchor, and that is where Carlos Baleba becomes so interesting. Baleba offers something different. Other midfielders may provide progression, passing quality, and creativity. Baleba brings athleticism, mobility, defensive aggression, and recovery speed. He has the physical profile to cover large spaces. He can challenge for possession. He can protect the area in front of the defense. And when Manchester United lose the ball, he has the speed to recover and help stop transitions before they become dangerous. That is extremely important. Modern defensive midfielders cannot simply stand in front of the back four and wait for attacks to arrive. They have to participate in possession. They have to understand when to drop deeper, when to support the build-up, when to move forward, and when to immediately recover after possession is lost. Baleba has the physical tools to perform that role. His mobility gives Carrick something valuable because it can allow the players around him greater freedom. And there is another interesting part of Baleba's profile that shouldn't be ignored. He is naturally left-footed. That might sound like a small detail. Tactically, it isn't. Midfield balance is influenced by passing angles, body positioning, and the direction from which players receive and challenge for the ball. A natural left-footed midfielder can open passing lanes that aren't always as comfortable for a right-footed player. He can receive possession on different angles. He can switch the direction of attacks. And defensively, his natural body shape can help when covering certain areas of the pitch. These are small details individually. Over 90 minutes, however, small details can change how smoothly an entire midfield operates. And this is where the Baleba idea becomes even more interesting. Because the biggest benefit may not be what Baleba himself does. It may be what his presence allows everyone else to do. Imagine Bruno Fernandes operating higher up the pitch, concentrating more of his energy on creating chances rather than constantly recovering deep into his own half. Imagine Kobbie Mainoo receiving possession, knowing that an athletic defensive midfielder is protecting the space behind him. That changes the risk calculation. Mainoo can concentrate more on what makes him special, receiving under pressure, carrying possession through tight areas, and connecting midfield with attack. Bruno can stay closer to the areas where he is most dangerous, and Baleba can provide the recovery speed and defensive presence behind them. On paper, the balance makes sense. Creativity higher up, technical control through midfield, athleticism, and defensive protection underneath. But football isn't played on paper, and this is where Carrick faces perhaps his biggest challenge. You can sign talented players, you can identify complementary profiles, you can draw the perfect midfield structure on a tactical board. But that doesn't mean the relationships between those players appear immediately. Great midfields develop an understanding that eventually becomes almost automatic. A midfielder receives the ball and already knows where his teammate is moving. A player vacates a position and somebody else instinctively covers the space. One midfielder presses and another immediately understands where the second ball is likely to fall. The players don't need to stop and think about every movement. They simply know. That understanding takes time. And time is something Manchester United may not have much of. The Premier League doesn't wait for a new midfield to develop chemistry. Every mistake can be punished. Every hesitation can create a transition. Every misunderstanding can open space for an opponent. That means Carrick's work on the training ground becomes incredibly important. Passing patterns have to become repetitive. Positioning has to become instinctive. Players have to understand when to move forward, when to stay, when to press, and when to protect the space behind them. Communication will also be critical. A new midfield needs players constantly talking, pointing, and organizing. Those details are what eventually transform several talented individuals into one functioning unit. And that is why Carlos Baleba is such a fascinating piece of this Manchester United project. The attraction isn't simply that he is talented, it's that his profile potentially solves a structural problem. Manchester United have players who can create. They have players who can progress possession. They have midfielders comfortable receiving the ball. What they have needed is someone capable of providing the athletic foundation underneath all of that. Someone who can recover. Someone who can protect space. Someone who can give the more creative players greater freedom. Carlos Baleba could be that player, but there is still a difference between having the right ingredients and producing the finished product. Carrick may have the pieces. Now he has to make them work together. And ultimately, that is what the opening weeks of the season will reveal. Not simply whether Carlos Baleba is a good midfielder, but whether his presence changes Manchester United's midfield as a whole. Does he give Bruno more freedom? Does he provide greater protection during transitions? Does he allow United to control matches more effectively? And can Carrick develop the chemistry quickly enough for this new midfield to compete at the level Manchester United expect? Because if the answer to those questions is yes, Carlos Baleba might not simply be another Manchester United midfielder. He might be the missing piece. So what do you think? Is Carlos Baleba the midfielder Manchester United have been missing? And what would your ideal Manchester United midfield look like with Baleba in the team? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy football stories, tactical analysis, and the biggest developments from across the game, subscribe to Football Chronicles. Thanks for watching.